Now, only a day after the IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati, appointed a six-man team to oversee the fresh presidential election, the Jubilee has promptly rejected it. In a statement, Jubilee says some of the people on the IEBC team are partisan, and the latest development compounds NASA's demands for the replacement of IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba and 5 other officials. However, the Commission chairman, Wafula Chebukati, has cautioned that the political players against interfering with independence of the Commission, asking that they allow IEBC to make its own internal changes. Chris Thyro with this report.
IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati's headache of putting his house in order and prepare for a repeat of the presidential election in the next 40 days just got worse after Jubilee Party released a list of 9 individuals that they want replaced before the polls. In a letter signed by the party's Secretary General, Raphael Tuju, they have credible information that the 9 IEBC staff are partisan. They include Marajan Hussein Marajan, who was appointed the project coordinator by Chebukati only yesterday, Salome Oyugi, who will be the head of legal, Demika Mai, Crispin Oye, Joseph Ayata, Joyce Akum, Luis Onyango, and Caroline Mayange. Also named by Tuju in his letter is the corporate communications manager, Tabitha Mutemi. Hussein headed the team at the Bomas of Kenya that received the Forms 34B from the constituencies before their validation, while Salome Oyugi was picked to replace her boss, Praxidis Tororei, as head of legal in the project, and whom NASA had raised objection of her heading the legal team. On Tuesday evening, Chebukati bowed to pressure from the NASA principals and carried out a temporary purge on its senior staff by announcing a new 6-man team that will manage the fresh elections. Those sidelined were CEO Ezra Chiloba and his deputy Betty Nyabuto, as well as head of ICT James Muhati.
Hatuwezi kuchukua mbuzi zetu tuweke fisi ya chunge. Mimi sikusema Chebukati, mimi nilisema Chiloba. Si ni kweli? Kwa hivyo Chebukati, fagia IEBC na usikubali wewe kuonyesha njia ya kufanya kazi yako. Kuiba was digital, lakini kunaswa was manual.
But in a letter responding to both coalitions, the electoral body chairman Wafula Chebukati has asked the politicians to respect the independence of the commission and that they should be allowed to make their own internal changes without any interference. While assuring the political players that the process will be transparent, Chebukati assured them that they will soon be conducting a full audit of the servers guided by the previous orders from the Supreme Court, and that the process will be conducted in the full glare of cameras and in the presence of all the stakeholders. However, the Commission has rejected NASA's demand of recruiting new officers across the country, stating that there is no sufficient time, as well as auditing the whole voter register. However, the Commission is still in discussions in regards to the printing of the presidential ballot papers, as well as result declaration forms, and that they will soon be communicating to the stakeholders. NASA has insisted that Al Ghurair should not print the ballot papers.
Al Ghurair imechapisha makaratasi za kupiga kura na maforms ambazo hazina serial number, ambazo hazina security marks. There you go back to Al Ghurair.
Although NASA team still objects to the October 17th date set for the fresh presidential election, the date has already been gazetted and the duel will be a 2-man race, pitting President Kenyatta against his main challenger, Raila Odinga. Chris Thyro, KTN News.
Now, NASA is now appealing for more volunteers to boost its adopt a polling station strategy, which they say is instrumental in detecting IEBC anomalies. This comes as planned IEBC meeting with NASA principals yesterday was pushed to today. Duncan Kayamba looks at the key changes NASA wants implemented immediately ahead of round 2 of the political battle with Jubilee.
The National Super Alliance Fraternity was here at the Wiper Party headquarters for its 3rd parliamentary group meeting to map out new strategies as NASA and Jubilee prepare for what may be their final political fight, slated for 17th October. But as soon as the meeting got underway, two of the principals, Kalonzo Musyoka and Moses Wetangula, left for what would have been a hurriedly convened crisis meeting with IEBC, leaving Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi behind. However, an hour later, NASA leader Raila Odinga also emerged and declined to address the media, with sources saying he was on his way to join the two before Mudavadi later followed suit. The said meeting, however, aborted and will now be held on Thursday from 8 a.m. NASA is on record as demanding for consultations with the IEBC with regard to the forthcoming fresh presidential election, insisting on key issues they want addressed before the fresh poll. This includes the change of the already gazetted date of Tuesday, 17th October.
This time round, there is no second guessing. IEBC must get its act together and get this election right. We have the position which is completely different from Jubilee's position. Jubilee's position is bora uchaguzi, ours is uchaguzi bora.
Among the issues the PG deliberated on was funding for the round 2 political battle, whereby, just like Jubilee, NASA is also reaching out to all its elected leaders to chip in and fund the fresh round of presidential campaigns. Newly elected MPs were each asked to contribute at least 200,000 shillings, while those who have served more than a term will be required to pay 500,000 shillings, even as NASA appealed for support from well-wishers.
We have an account, a pay bill number for fundraising to facilitate our activities, and the pay bill number is 99144.
There could also be a major shakeup of NASA's polling agents amid claims that some of them sabotaged their Adopt a Polling Station strategy.
The reason why we won this the petition at the Supreme Court is because we prepared ourselves to know when our election was being stolen. And we caught those who were stealing our elections, and that is why we are repeating this election.
For now, it seems NASA's main focus is tightening all the loose ends before fully embarking on an all-out campaign. Duncan Hemba, KTN News.
All right, and looks like both sides of the divide, as expected, as has played along all along, are not about to agree. And right in the middle, we find IEBC. Are we ever going to get to a point where we overcome this trust issue? Because here, there is a lot of mistrust playing.
Yeah, first, you cannot agree more with the IEBC, as it states rightly. As a constitutional commission, they are guided by Chapter 15 of the Constitution. And the very core of those provisions is that, one, it is independent. It cannot operate on the direction or instructions of any other person. The commission in itself has to be given the leeway to conduct its own internal affairs, so much so that the object being inspiring confidence. Jubilee has a different opinion. NASA has a different opinion, but the most important thing, in as much as it is independent, it ought to also have room for consultation. There may not be 100% consensus on most of the issues. However much, that does not buy it from listening to the other parties. Like it was said, there is a pre-arranged meeting with the NASA coalition so that they can thrash some of those issues. But the most important critical thing, as you read in the news, is the issue of the ballot papers. Right. That will be the make or break deal. Whoever it is who is going to print these ballot papers has to be an entity which inspires confidence, because as it is, the previous one was very controversial. It even ended up in courts. So I think the commission as it is ordinarily should bring all the stakeholders on the table, settle that issue of the ballot papers, and then let the campaigns go on.
Once the ballot papers have been sorted out, because we saw that sorted out, although they've come into play now with the petition that was in the Supreme Court, There is the issue of, and I think this was mentioned by one of the leaders, that elections are no longer now stolen on stuffed ballots. It is between the time of recording, transmission, and announcement that there is a problem. How do we deal with that, given that NASA have requested for access to the servers, which they say they have not been given full access as they had requested, yet we have now Chebukati changing things as per NASA's request?
Yes, there is that news bit which came out that IEBC has kind of scaled down. One, the audit of the server now is going to be done in the presence of ICT experts, both from two accredited international ICT experts. Jubilee and NASA also will have to bring their own observers so that all those issues of transmission are dealt with. Rightly so, the era of stealing elections through stuffed ballots is now gone. It's now digital. The weakest link will now seem to be transmission. After all the ballots are in, counted, what goes on onto those forms? And thereafter, how is it transmitted? I think most of that is the weakest link. There is a proposal that going forward, whatever government comes into place, what ought to be done is devolving the issue of transmission of results. Let people vote, let votes be counted at the polling station, let them be counted at that level, and let them now be collated at the constituency level. Once they're collated at the constituency level, let the constituency be the lowermost devolved center of analyzing those results, such that where there's an issue, you now only have to deal with about 290 polling centers, unlike the over 40,000, which is quite intimidating. When you have to deal with only 290 constituencies, it will be so easy for you to isolate and say this number of constituencies, they have issues, recount can be done, and such like. So I think the way forward going, when Kenya will be thinking about electoral reforms, we need to think about devolving the issue of transmission of votes, counting at the constituency level.
At what point do you think we should have this conversation of the IEBC? Because if you look at, for example, the states, you hardly ever get to hear of even the body that runs the election. They are credible, they assumed to be credible. Again, we do have Russia apparently that hacked into the system. But that aside, we seem to put a lot of, we concentrate a lot on the IEBC and not so much the IEBC, but even individuals. Right now, there were calls for Chebukati to be out of the way, for Chiloba, for Ezra Chiloba or Roslyn Akombe. And one wonders, do we have systems in place that can actually be operated by anyone per se?
I think the issue has got all to do with the electoral system. The electoral system which came into being in the 2010 Constitution is one, it's first past the post principle, and then 50+1. Whereby now it has a lot of emphasis on numbers. That's why the concept of tyranny of numbers has been an issue since 2013, whereby if you are able to patch up an ethnic coalition with massive numbers, then by and large you'll have had one step forward in the presidency. And being that the presidency also is taken as the source of all government goodies, it makes it very competitive. Unlike the US, where by now they have the college system. The advantages of the college system, as has also been proposed, there's a bill by Omkia Omtata seeking to reform our Kenyan electoral system so that we adopt the college system. The college system does not really emphasize on the numbers. Right. It emphasizes on representative voting, whereby an electoral college comprising of all the counties, they are assigned a specific number of electoral votes for each county, whereby if a candidate, if you win, for example, in Nairobi, you win the majority of votes in Nairobi, and then that now will entitle you to take all the electoral votes of Nairobi. The advantage being, a county as small as Lamu, even if they don't have numbers, their numbers are insignificant. It could have possibly 4 electoral votes. And those 4 electoral votes could be very crucial to swing a presidential result. Just like in the US when you say Ohio. Ohio had about, not very number of many electoral votes, but whoever won Ohio was assured of winning the presidency of the United States. Right. So it makes it more representative. Lamu, Turkana, all those marginalized areas, though not many on population, the electoral votes now will be very significant.
All right, well, let's wait and see how this is going to play out. And finally, before we move on to the next story, your thoughts on the date. There's also a bone of contention on the date, and NASA saying it is too soon, Jubilee saying, well, we are ready to go.
First, IEBC at this juncture ought to really inspire confidence. And whatever date it sets in place ought to be a date that the parties have had time to be consulted on. The issue that NASA had with that date was that previously the Education Minister, CS, said that we prefer this date. And moments later, IEBC comes out and says, well, indeed, this is the date. So pointedly so, it looks like that argument had credence. But just as it has been said already, it's gazetted, but that does not bar. Should IEBC and the opposition reach consensus on that issue of the election date today, then nothing stops it. It can be they can just issue a new gazette and a new date set in place. All that matters is about preparation. 17th October, will IEBC be ready? Will it have set up systems by that date? That remains to be seen.
That remains to be seen, all right? And we wait to see how that plays out. And of course, right here on KTN News, we certainly are keeping our eyes on that. Let's move on to other stories.